I spent 5 years making a documentary that pretty much no one will ever see. And sadly, that is not an uncommon story. I want you to learn from my mistakes, so when you make your next documentary, you can make something enjoyable, viewable, and, could you imagine, profitable. All right, so episode 11, we're going to talk about what is called Good Cake right now, working title. And before we do that, of course, take a nice little swiggy. Cold, that one's cold, that's good. Let's dive in to Good Cake. Let's see what notes I have for you. Yes, okay, so it's interesting how I came into this story with Amber, who is a childhood friend. I stole her Pokemon cards. They found out. Yeah, we were in like a church thing together, like a group. And then, I went to her high school for a semester, I think, in my high school escapades. And then, many, many years later, we're talking, God, so that was 2008 or 7, high school, I might have seen her or, said hi. And then, didn't probably see or talk to her again until 2023. Yeah, wow. Okay. So many years had passed and she was off doing her thing. I was off doing my thing. And it just so happened, I was in New York City, summer of 2023. I just saw a post from a DP friend of mine in Detroit, and he was like working with Amber and doing some comedy thing. And I was like, oh my God, Amber. And so I reached out to her and I was like, yo, like, what's good? Like, hey, like, cool to see you working with Noah. And it just spurred a conversation. And that was literally like a week or two or less where I knew I was going back to Michigan after New York City. And then I didn't know what I was doing after that. I think I knew I was just going to be in Michigan for a while. Yeah, that's what it was. And so we talked about that. She kind of mentioned what she was doing with the comedy stuff and blah, blah, blah. And she mentioned like this stuff that was happening, and I remember having like a conversation in voice notes. That's what it was. I'm just recalling all this now. And we're going back and forth with voice notes. We have a call, I think it was, and all this stuff comes out about the situation with her brother and like the dog, and like there's this stuff personal stuff that comes out. And I was like, yo, like, this is a story. Like, I know you know this, but like, does someone need to tell you that this is a story? And she was like, yeah, I know. Like, it's really intense. Like, I don't know if I want to do it. Like, I've been hesitant. I was like, look, I would love to make a short little video about this with you. That's kind of where it started. Again, like with the thing in for this documentary. And so I was like, let's just see where it goes. Like, we can make something short and like, maybe like a mini doc and go from there. And she was all about it. And that's where it started. That's the beginning of this. The inception was like, I know there's a good story here. You know there's a good story here. Let's go for it. I didn't take my own advice. What I gave you in episode 1 and 2, I did not take my own advice in terms of getting contracts in order. Amber is a very empathetic person. She feels everything. She sees a lot of things. And she's got a lot going on emotionally. That's kind of the point of this story, is like, she's got stuff going on. And she uses comedy as her outlet. So I didn't want to push too much, especially in the beginning. I was like, let's just see what this is. Like, all good. Like, we're on the same page. Every turn that we're making is agreed upon. It's a negotiation where we know where the story is going. I'm not trying to hide anything from you. You've set your boundaries, etc. And so it was good in the beginning. And let's see. Yeah, exactly. So what I did learn from my own stuff, this Tucson documentary, was there needs to be more pre-production. There needs to be more planning. There needs to be much more conversation before shooting about where this is going. What do we want this to be? And that was kind of a cool conversation to have with Amber, was what do you want this to do for you if we make something out of this? And she's like, well, I want to grow in my comedy career. I want this to, this to get out there, this very wholesome story. Like, I wanted to just do good things for my career. I was like, okay, cool. Look, good story and career development. Like, I agree. That is what this should do for you. I want to, of course, make really special documentaries. So like that'll do this for me. We're good. Like same page. That should have been in a contract, but it wasn't. But it is what we talked about. And so, yeah, I mean, in terms of pre-production, it was good to be able to be like, okay, I just showed up to one of her shows with my camera. I filmed it. This is like very early on in the winter. And I was like, okay, I see what's happening. Like I see like the narrative she's building. I see what's going on with the storytelling she's trying to do with these sets. That's great. I stopped basically there. And I was like, let's talk about what this is going to be. And so what was cool is I already learned that lesson. I was like, I'm not just going to just roll on everything. I'm like, we talked about building the story. I figured out like kind of what I would want it to be, and creatively and also in terms of the storytelling of it. That's all great. So already I was making better decisions in terms of the pre-production, the storytelling, the preparation, the organization, all that kind of stuff. So that was great. I definitely need to talk about in terms of the note I have here is I planned each shoot, almost each shot that I wanted, where I was like, okay, do you have a show? What is it going to be about? Where is it going to be? How long is it? How long do I need to be there for? Do we need stuff before? Do we need stuff after? What do we need before and after? Like what story are we building that I would need to be with you before and after? And again, it was a lesson with the Tucson documentary, which was, I didn't like that I didn't have enough personal stuff in that documentary. It was just the interviews and the shows. And there's so much more to it than that. And so I was like, okay, let's do a day at the house. Like, let's see how you prep for shows. Like, let's go on a walk with the dog. Like, all this kind of stuff. Like, let's bring the dog to McDonald's, eat some fries. Like, that's what they do together. All this kind of stuff. And I knew to be building that and asking her, like, how can we make this more personal and better for you and me? And so all of that is good. Again, learning lessons from the last time. And that's huge. And what it allowed me to do was, actually, yeah, this is kind of the note, but I'll say both things. It allowed me to be comfortable shaping the story, especially because of the trauma that I had with the Tucson documentary, which was I let the story come to me. I let other people build the narrative and agree on, what the story was. And I kind of just like went along with it. This one was, I need to know what's happening. I need to agree to the story myself. And then we can have a negotiation about how we're going to unfold that. And that was good. But also, it allows for her to say yes or no, where it's like, me going, I like this idea. Can we do this? And there was a conversation I remember specifically where it was like, hey, you said something in this interview. We should follow up on this. And she was like, I don't know. Like that's a lot. Or like, I don't know if I want to do that. And it was a conversation, and that's the point. And we ultimately shot a version of that where it's like, we both agree on what we're doing here. That's how it should be. There should be no surprises. There should be no like someone is so uncomfortable they feel like they're being forced to do this. Nothing is that important, truly. I think what's good to mention as well is while having those conversations with her, I was able to stand my ground. And I remember myself saying one time, this is my story. I'm telling it. And so what's interesting is like that had to be said because it was obvious that like she was like, well, this, we're going to do it this way because it's my, and I'm like, no, I'm telling the story of you. Like you're not doing it. Like you're not the director. You're not the producer. You're not like writing. You're not doing that. And I think that's important. And again, you have to establish that stuff in the beginning because if you leave it too loose and too open, then people will try to step in somewhere or they'll be angry that like they're not being able to do a certain thing. And we did get to that point basically where I was like, look, like, no, like this is mine. Like, and it's sad that it did get to that point, but what's cool is if we did move forward from that at the time. I will mention something else later down the line, but in that moment, it was good. I was able to say that. We were able to have a back and forth, and then we went and did something together. That's great. Another tidbit, I shot for the edit. I'm so impressed, even to this day, how little footage I have from this documentary, because truly it was, what do we need? Why and how much do we need? Of course, I left myself open to, anything that might unfold on those shoot days, but the shoot days were planned. We had a goal, we had a mission, and I had that narrative in my mind while I was shooting. And whatever else came along the way is just extra. And it's a bonus, and that's great. But I never went into a shoot day being like, okay, what am I supposed to get here? What should be happening right now? Like, I don't know, like, I hope something good happens. And a lot of documentary might be that, is like, I hope something good happens. And I'd hate to be in that situation again, like just recording for 8 or 10 hours a day. And this was great for that because this has been so long of a process, is I even left Michigan and, 6 months later went back, flew myself back for a very specific part of the shoot that we agreed on. And that's great because it had to be a certain time of the season and had to look a certain way. And she agreed to it. And like, that's the point, is like, that is what you should be doing if you're putting this story in the right box, is like, everything needs to have a check mark on it. And since we weren't rushing it, I wasn't just throwing things at the wall, recording whatever. I did leave the area and I was like, I'm going to come back for this very specific thing. Here's what we need. We booked things, we planned things. It was all great and it worked itself out, and that's wonderful. I'm very proud of that. Even though I did make the mistake of not doing contracts again, there's no money attached to this as of yet. But what's cool is it is a cohesive story. It's sitting on a drive. And kind of like I mentioned before, I'm taking a break from it. I'm taking a very long break from it. And that feels fine. And I'm okay with that. Another thing I did right this time for this documentary is I know that I wanted to be 4x3. And so I was shooting, I was monitoring for that while shooting. And on the monitor, I had the frame guides up. But also the C200, which I was shooting on for the majority, actually for all of this has been C200. You have to record raw to get the best image out of it. You can't go out, into a monitor HDMI because it just goes down to like 8-bit or something, which is terrible for color. And so everything was raw. So you're getting this, this 4K, this massive DCI image, but I'm monitoring for 4x3. And so what I did is I would make dailies. Every shoot day, I would come home like clockwork, like a real set. I'd come home, I'd ingest all the footage, I'd back it up, a second time to have a second copy of it. And then I'd go into DaVinci, I'd put my personal LUT that I love on it. And then I would make a very small MP4 out of that, a transcode, which I am then using every time I go into the edit. These small versions that are 4x3 and that are colored in a way that I can show them to anybody of any caliber, and they're like, this looks good. That is what matters to me. That's kind of how I do the workflow, is I'm not working with raw footage ever. And I think you shouldn't either. So your transcodes should be viewable in Rec 709 at the very least, and colored where you could show an investor or someone, a producer, and you need to be able to show them how good this looks already. You should be explaining to them how good it can look later. Let's talk about the alternative interview style. Because I put so much thought into this time and I wasn't kind of just like reacting to life and the story, I was able to think like, what should I do differently for this interview? And like I said in the beginning, Amber's a very specific person. I know her from youth. I was getting to know her again now in our like more adult life. And I knew that it would not be a smart or comfortable situation to sit her down and interview her. Classic documentary style. It's like, let's sit you in a chair and do 3 hours of interview like this day, or like maybe do a couple days of a couple hour interviews. I knew that wasn't going to be a smart idea, and it wouldn't yield good results in terms of like just the anxiety that she would experience, the stress, and the emotions that would come out of this interview. I didn't want to just her be in a chair surrounded by lights. So what I did was I thought creatively about how can I still interview her, because I still need her saying stuff to build this story around. But how could I do that alternatively? And ultimately, talking to her, I realized that she loved baking. Over the course of this year, like she would always be baking something or talking about baking. And I was like, okay, my parents had this house at the time, a really nice big kitchen, like with an island in the middle. And so it'd be easy for me to move around and just like, throw some lights up into the ceiling, just get the level up, and truly just follow her and candidly talk to her about all the stuff I wanted to talk to her about for the interview. And so we did that. She ended up, making a coconut cake from beginning to end, which took hours. And over the course of the whole thing, I would just be walking around the kitchen with her and just having a conversation. Nothing was planned. And in my head, I knew what I kind of wanted to talk about, and she would go off and riff. And that's the point. Like a subject like this, like Amber, she is a performer. Like she's a comedian, she's an actress, she's an improv person. Like there is so much she brought to this that other people wouldn't, because she's a natural performer. So, she went off a different direction. She knew how to bounce off of me. And like, there's a relationship, which is really interesting. There's a relationship on camera that you can tell, but you never see me. But you know that there's a rapport between me behind the camera and her on camera because we're always talking to each other. And that's what I love because I've done so much of that in behind the scenes for films or music videos, whatever it may be. And that's what I love about behind the scenes documentary is like I insert myself into it. I do understand that some people don't like that, but that is my style. I'm always interacting with the people from behind the camera. I'm not just like the, observer or like the professional. Like I want to kind of fuck with people and get them out of their, like little bubble for a second or just, get out of their skin. And that's what this was, which is huge because it does add a whole different personality to the documentary, which I'm very excited for people to experience because it's not just it's not observing Amber. It's like I'm in it with Amber. And that's important to me. And then ultimately, because of this, to kind of wrap all this up, I let the interview inform the story. And that kind of goes back to editing as you go and building the story as you go and making sure to know what's happening and what should happen next. And she said a few things in her interview where I was like, oh, that's how we can end the story. And that's cool because I love that, where it's like, it's such a well-built story that she'll be saying something and then the people will be able to remember that. And then the story ends on that, like, oh, she said this, like, of course. So my lips are so dry, like I can feel like one of the pieces of skin. Or is lips skin? Anyways, but the story is so well informed by itself that each step makes sense. And I've been showing a teaser of it, just kind of something I threw together, like this could be a story, right, guys? Like to producers and stuff like that. And every time someone watches the teaser, they're like, oh no, you have something for sure. Like you got it. Like you've got her, you've got the dog, you've got the personality in it. Like you've got the story. You can build something off of this. And I really like that. And I know the next episode, I want to just show you a little bit of footage. I'm really excited, just like I did with this documentary. I want to show you a bit of footage from this. But before I do that, the last thing I really want to say about this is the future of this is still unknown because I still made the same mistakes. And it ended up being the issue that I told you it would be. I wish I would have made these videos for myself before I started this new documentary. But I didn't get the contracts lined up in the beginning, like I said, that you should. And I knew that I should have. But again, like this is a childhood friend and it's a really dramatic, in-depth story. And it's touch and go. And so I didn't do anything. And I did tell her, I was like, hey, sooner or later, you're going to have to sign like a story rights thing, a release, like all of this. And she's like, okay, yeah. And I even showed her like a potential budget. I shouldn't have done this. This is a lesson I learned is like, I showed her like what budget could happen for this if I were to get money. And then I think she's looked at the dollar amounts and was like, oh my God, like I'm only getting like $1,000 or less and you're going to have all this. And it's like, never show the subjects, the money that goes into this stuff. Because it's like, you, at the end of the day, obviously, as a director or creator, typically don't make any money. Producers make all the money or, whatever it may be. Like, it's not good for them to imagine other people making money and them not making money because unless they're, really smart, they can't imagine what this would do for them or their career. But like we talked about in the beginning, when I asked her, what does she want out of this? It's to help her build her career and get the story out there. That doesn't mean you're going to make money. That means it's going to literally help you build your career. That's the goal. But once you start talking about money, everyone changes. And that's really sad. And it got to the point where after a year, I found a really good, trustworthy producer that could help this project. I brought this producer to Amber. We all had a conversation. It all seemed great. But as the details were being fleshed out, I could just tell that Amber was not here for it. And at that point, it's too late because there's not a contract for anyone. She's not going to sign a contract now because she's like, obviously scared about like what's going to happen, what's going on, like getting kind of like the wedding, like cold feet, like, oh, wait a second, like, is this real? Is this going to happen? And because of that, I messed up the way that I did before again. And it's like, you need to corner people into responsibility. That is just the truth of all of this is you can't allow them to have the leverage to leave and set fire to your project. And that's kind of what's happening right now. Is this conversation was many, many months ago, and I haven't looked at it since. I don't even know what I should do with this yet, and I'm trying to think creatively about it, because at the end of the day, and we talked about release in the first few episodes, it's like you have a few options in terms of like the way release works, but there is copyright involved as well, and so the whole thing gets really messy, and you need to figure that out in the beginning. And so for me now, I'm just like, okay, well, I know this is good, but like now this is going to be a problem, so like I got to figure this out, or it's going to be nothing. And it's just like, man, so I'm just kicking myself, reminding myself that like, here I am again. Like I should have taken my own advice and done the right steps. So what's kind of cool is this is an ever unfolding thing, this new documentary that I'm working on, and life is happening around it. So we'll see what happens. I will definitely have an update for you, which is cool. I will one day be able to talk about, was this a huge mistake, or did something come of this, or maybe some things in between. But until then, the next episode, we'll go through a little bit of the footage. I don't want to give too much of it away, but I want to show you like how I shot this differently, how I approached differently, and just like the cool stuff that I got out of this with Amber, and we'll go from there. So hope you enjoyed. As always, drop a comment if you'd like. I'll join in on the conversation, or if I said something that's confusing, I'm very confusing. I know that, but it is a superpower to confuse people. See you then.